Hello, everyone. This is Mamta Bhandari. Thank you for being here. Thank you for taking note of this quiet crisis. Your presence means a lot. I'm excited to get you started. I have spent over 2 decades in a world at the intersection of finance, technology, as well as strategy. And all through the years, I have been attracted to big complex problems and finding simple solutions that have long term impact. My ability to step back and see the full picture has also made me aware of many problems that are often overlooked. The ones without the big ROIs, the tidy roadmaps, as well as the quick wins. These are the ones that we usually sidestep because we think someone else will go solve this problem. Last year, I stepped away from my role as a builder of financial products to solve some of those problems. And that's what brings me here. That's what brings me to Boys Who Write and Sheila Kapoor. What I've learned so far about this problem is that what the boys are experiencing today is just a tip of the iceberg. It shows up as silence, disengagement, a reluctance to read, write, participate, slipping grades that start in kindergarten. But underneath, there are deeper cracks, amplified by digital distraction, social isolation, too few emotional safe spaces, and institutions and systems that don't meet the boys where they're at. We're also seeing a growing pool of online voices that offer belonging but often distort or limit messages. The impact is visible in the numbers. Boys are 50% more likely to repeat a grade. Only 43% of boys are today go attend college, which is a full reversal from a generation ago. Labor force participation among men, young men especially, has dropped over 21%. And by the age of 18, more than half of the boys report that they are lonely. This isn't an academic gap. This isn't, this is a confidence gap. This is a future at risk gap. And that's what Boys Who Write and Sheila Kapoor are trying to solve. Boys Who Write is a response to that. What Sheila and Boys Who Write have created is not remedial. It's radical in its simplicity because it helps boys find their voice through storytelling, writing, and mentorship. Not by preaching, but by drawing them into experiences that feel safe, exciting, and affirming. Sheila is doing this not for applause, but because she's seen what happens when this works. When a boy feels seen, when a boy tells his story, when he realizes that communication isn't weakness, it's strength. Most importantly, Sheila and her team are doing this from a place of care. They are deeply, genuinely vested in the well being of boys and their emotional growth. Boys Who Write is helping boys find their voice so that they can write their own future. So here's my hope that you don't walk away today with just some new insights, but with a deeper understanding of the problem and get a glimpse of how Sheila is looking to actually solve that. We don't need awareness, we need allies. Because this quiet crisis where we raise affects us all, because we are raising boys that will play a big role in the world, in the communities that our daughters and we ourselves will live in. And I'm especially relieved to know that you don't have to take my word for it, because you get to hear this from Sheila. And there's no better person to guide this dialogue than Alex Counts, a pioneer in microfinance, a lifelong reader, an avid writer who brings his experience, empathy, and insights into every conversation. Alex, Sheila, over to you.
Well, thank you, Mamta. You talked about allies a second ago, but you're such an ally. I have to really call you a champion of Boys Who Write, and thank you for getting me involved. It's something that I am so excited about, and I want to welcome all of you, the audience who've signed on, who've taken an hour out of your day on a Thursday in the early summer to learn about Boys Who Write and to learn about the work that Shayla Kapoor has started and that we're all getting involved in. So how this is going to go, I'm going to say a few words, very few. Then I'm going to have a fireside chat with her. Going to then take some questions from you all that you can use the Q&A function in Zoom to put any comments, anything you want to add to the discussion, any questions you have for her. And then we're going to have closing comments from a board member of Boys Who Write and a friend of mine, Jessica Langerman. So please do, as you go through this, if you have a question, something you want to contribute, post it, and I will read it, and we'll have some conversation about it, as many as we can get to. Now, I'm super excited to be involved in this organization, super excited to be part of this webinar today. Thank you for inviting me. It's really, I feel blessed to be associated with this organization. I think you'll understand why even more as it goes on. We hope that you learn some things today about a crisis that many people are unaware of, but more and more people are becoming aware of every day. You see articles coming out now on an almost weekly basis in major publications. We also hope you learn something about something tangible being done to address it, so we can help you understand that there are solutions to the crisis of facing boys and young men in our society, and also how you can get involved. This is a startup. There are lots of things that need to be done. If you want to contribute your time, talent, treasure, or influence to this organization, you'll be welcomed with open arms. And if you can do it right now, wonderful. And if you can do it a year from now, this problem is not going away anytime soon. There's going to be a lot of work to be done over the next 5 to 10 years. I think we can really make a dent in this problem if we get organized. And so we'll be here when you want to get involved. So Shayla, welcome. Great to see you. And I want to just start off by asking you, can you share with the audience how and when did you realize the issue of boys had become such an important societal problem, and tell us why it matters so much?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for being here today, Alex. I really appreciate your time. And Mamta, thank you for your intro. And I appreciate everyone taking an hour out of their day to learn about this issue and also about what Boys Who Write is doing. I think it makes sense for me to talk a little bit about my background first and kind of give you a reason for why I started Boys Who Write. I've spent the bulk of my career in high tech, launching new products and services. But within that, I was always very passionate about education. I ended up co-founding a school in East Palo Alto called Oxford Day Academy. Worked with girls' education in both Pakistan and Afghanistan. But most significantly, started homeschooling my two children, a boy and a girl, about 8 years ago. And it's within that experience of raising and educating both of them that I really started to identify what was happening with boys. I like to tell a story of how I taught them both how to read. When I taught my daughter how to read, it was very quiet. We did flashcards, we sat on the floor. And when I taught my son how to read, we were marching, we were, tooting the horn, we're making loud sounds. And it just was indicative of the fact that they can both learn equally. It's just about how do we approach boys versus how do we approach girls. And of course, this is not true for every boy and every girl, but anecdotally, it was what I was experiencing. As my son started to go through the middle school years, he did end up being very interested in reading and writing. But I found it hard to find any boys' book clubs, any writing groups that had other boys that he could share his experiences with. Um, Contrarily, with my daughter, there were a wealth of girls' book clubs, a wealth of writing
Mm.
groups for her. And so, not a lot of support in the humanities area for boys. Um, he's a senior in high school now, and he starts to talk a lot about the kinds of friendships he's making and comparing that to the friendships his older sister is making. And her experiences, she has very deep friendships, she has very substantive relationships. And his experience is that most of his relationships are around sports, video games, and it's really difficult to kind of get underneath to start to share any kind of emotion or real feeling towards another friend. So anecdotally, I was kind of experiencing all of this, and over, many years thinking about what was happening with boys and seeing it with my friends and other boys that were in our community. And so finally just really started to research what was happening, simultaneously wanted to make a move in this area. And so, of course, the research does back up, what I found. And Mamta talked about this a little bit in her intro. 54% of boys say that they're lonely by the time they get to college. Um, Reading and writing, boys are suffering dramatically. They're behind girls at every grade level. If you look at the global world stage, by the age of 10, girls are more likely to be reading than boys are. If you look at our national report card in writing, the last writing exam that took place, only 16% of boys are considered proficient writers. That's only 32% for girls. Both numbers are low, but really the boys are in dire straits. So it was with that, kind of understanding that I started to look at developing an organization that looked at what I fundamentally believe is needed for boys, which is an improvement in communication skills. And so that's the impetus and also what Boys Who Write does at a very high level.
Mm, wonderful. And having had the pleasure of meeting your two children a few months ago, I can say that you did a great job with them. And just like you're doing a great job launching Boys Who Write, and now it's easier to see the link between the two. What factors do you think contribute to the most to the boys' declining ability to communicate? Why are we in this situation in your view?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting question because, when we look at boys in pre-K or kindergarten, we see boys that are very open, they're very vulnerable, they cry, they express emotion towards their parents, they hug. If a friend falls, they help a friend, And then all of a sudden, as the years progress, we start to see
Mm,
boys kind of closing and disengaging, and we wondered, what is happening to the boys that they're suddenly not able to really emote or express themselves in the same way that these very sweet boys did when they were younger. I think that there are a few factors that are playing into this. One is, of course, literacy, which I alluded to before. There was a large report done by the World Bank that talked about boys' disengagement from education and also their educational underachievement. So we know that boys are suffering there. When we look at their usage online, they're playing a lot of video games. We can say that they're almost always online. They're interacting with platforms like Twitch and Discord. And so when we think about skills like being able to listen carefully to another person or to be able to speak, those platforms don't really allow for that more nuanced conversation to take place. And so we're kind of crowding out that ability for boys to work on those kinds of skills. And then as a result, we start to have a lot of mental health issues where boys are lonely, where they might be depressed, but they very rarely go seek help for their depression. We look at substance abuse disorders, we look at suicide rates, sadly, and most of those are being taken up by men.
mm. Well, this is a big issue. Then on top of all this, right, social media, influencers like Andrew Tate, how do these take a already troubling situation and make it worse? Help us understand what's really going on here.
Yeah, I don't know if everyone's familiar with who Andrew Tate is. He's a social media influencer. He has millions and millions of middle school boys following him, and his whole ethos is that he wants to teach boys how to be men. He does that using misogyny, by advocating for violence, by being kind of ruthless and making boys understand power in a very different way. There was a show on TV recently, Netflix series called Adolescence that probably many people watched, um, kind of talking a lot about social media and the harms that they have on boys and the kind of, the content that they're being drawn to online that promotes disengagement, that promotes violence, that promotes aggression. That show, Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister of the UK, ended up watching it with his two boys and then arranged for all secondary schools in the UK to screen that show. So the UK is very invested in this problem as well. So yeah, social media has a very dramatic effect on what's happening out there today.
Well, let's talk about what you're going to do with Boys Who Write. What some of the solutions that you're bringing to bear. But just as you spoke, I maybe like some of the audience here, I started to think of my own, particularly the male members of the audience or people that are raising boys or had boys as siblings. And I thought about when I was in 10th grade, if you'll indulge me for a second, and I was a little bit of, not the most socially adept 10th grader. And I was in an English class and I was doing well in math, but I just assumed that English writing wasn't my thing. And I had one teacher just take a real interest in it. And I kind of got good at it. I mean, like I could have been good at it all along, but I got good at it. I went on to be an AP English and I've written 4 books. And it's like that I'm thinking of that there's an opportunity here to give people a nudge, let them explore some talent that is kind of submerged within themselves and all the things that can lead to. My development, my social emotional development through writing, I'm sure this someone who understands these things more than I do could explain how those all happened. And I just imagine this happening with the programming you're doing. But first of all, in general, what kinds of things help? You can't do everything that's needed here, but what are the kind of interventions that can move preteen boys and young men of various ages in the right direction here?
Yeah, I mean, I think role modeling is critical. If we look at the national stage today, we don't see a lot of positive role models. And in fact, we see a lot of normalization of behavior that we in the past have considered unacceptable. The way we talk about women, the way we talk about people with disabilities. All of that is becoming normalized for middle schoolers, when they turn on the TV. So I think it's very important to inculcate positive role models. In terms of reading and writing, what we hope to do is really provide those experiences in a way that boys can relate to. So we're not teaching reading and writing. We're not focusing on the 5-paragraph essay that we teach in school. But rather, we're trying to say, look, you need reading and writing for these different kinds of things that happen in your life. We want to turn boys not necessarily away from those traditional roles of engineer, doctor, lawyer, but kind of open up their sphere so that they can see other jobs that are open to them. Maybe they want to be a TV host, maybe they want to be a television producer, maybe they want to make movies. Maybe they want to be a nurse. We want all of those other careers to be accessible. And by kind of creating a program where they can understand the value and then they can have a deeper understanding of themselves, we hope that they will go out into the world and be more compassionate, empathetic adults.
Mm, mm. I want to get to in a moment this pilot project you're doing this summer. I'm super excited about. But just in general, as you look 3 to 5 years in the future, what would success look like for Boys Who Write? You're not going to be able to do everything in the first year, the first summer, as critical as this is. And so people who are part of this can have an idea of where you're going and can track your success, or maybe even join the team and help you get there.
Yeah, I think maybe to just give you an overview of what Boys Who Write does. So, what we plan to do is create a gaming platform because we know that boys are online already. And
Mm,
within that platform, we're folding in curriculum that touches on um, topics such as, masculinity, empathy, compassion. We are looking at some of those kind of social emotional skills, and we're integrating that into writing and reading as well. And I'm happy to give you some examples of the curriculum as we move forward. What we hope to do in 3 to 5 years, well, in 3 years, we hope to reach 10,000 boys. That's the
mm,
goal. We really want to provide an intervention in what we believe is kind of a downward slide for boys. We want to provide positive mechanisms for them to be able to reach within themselves and be able to share with the world. And we hope to be in schools across the nation, but also around the world. Um, yeah.
That's great. And you know, you start thinking about um, as you're listening to this, you know, if you have connections to the schools in your county, in your city, you know, there might be whether because you're an educator yourself, you have children that have gone through them, or through some other way, you know, that you may be able to be an ambassador of the programming that this Boys Who Write does in your local school system, and be a source of change, and create a new reality for boys in your area, which will. But to make all that possible, this summer is critical,
Yeah.
and we've been building towards a very exciting program. Tell us what's going to be going on this summer that you've gotten me and others so excited about.
Yeah, so we have our first pilot, which will be with KIPP schools. And that pilot is a 6-week program that will inculcate all of the learnings that we are talking about today. I do want to give you some examples of the kind of curriculum that we are going to be launching within that pilot. Some of the things we're doing is, again, for the pilot, we're using existing technology. So we're not actually building our own platform yet, because we really want to take the learnings that we get from the pilots and then use that to go ahead and build the platform. So we're using existing technologies such as AI, Soundtrap, Scratch, Gather, you know, some of those kind of common platforms that students are familiar with. Within that, for example, for the writing element, what we do is we analyze rap songs and rap music, and we look at spoken word poetry, and we look at how the artists kind of put together those verses. What are their understandings of what they wanted to share? How are they communicating that out to the community that they're trying to reach with their music? We have a rap artist come in online and speak to the boys and talk about what they're doing. And then we have the boys start to develop their own spoken word poetry. At the end of that session, we use AI to put music to that, and then we help them publish it out in the world so that they can see their work, you know, out there. Another example of curriculum is we have the boys create an avatar of, you know, so also just to back up and tell you kind of so you can envision what the program looks like. This is, you know, 25 boys in a classroom. They each have their own Chromebook that they can log into the program with, but there's a projector showing the virtual world on a screen, and we have a virtual teacher that is also on the screen. We also have a teacher in the classroom that's helping out as well. And so within that, I lost my train of thought. I think we were talking about programming or I was going to give you another example of a curriculum idea. So, one of the other curriculum ideas that we have is, you know, we have these boys that are in the class create an avatar and describe what that boy's personality is like, or girl, or whatever, you know, whatever gender, and what they're wearing and all of that. And then we start to throw challenges at that avatar. So perhaps we put them in a village and we say, okay, your village has been bombed. What do you do next? Are you going to try and escape? Are you going to go try to save your family? Are you going to go get the community? What are you going to do? And based on those decisions, we, you know, step back and we analyze, what did you guys decide to do? Why did you decide to make those moves? And hopefully within that discussion, we start to talk about kind of things such as compassion and empathy and all of those things. The theme of our pilot is around power. And so,
Mm,
what we're trying to do is have boys understand what are the different kinds of power that exist and what does power mean. So, we have internal power. What does power mean for you yourself? You know, relational power. How do you use that power to interact with other people in your classroom, in your community? And then we have digital power. So you understand when you go
mm,
online, you know, you need to understand where you're going online and what choices you're making. So that gives you an overview of what the pilot is about. We've been very fortunate to just secure a second pilot with a school in India. So
mm.
we're very excited about that as well. And then looking to complete a couple of other pilots this summer.
Mm, fantastic. I want to again remind you all that if you want to contribute this discussion, share your own perspective, ask a question, use the question answer feature in Zoom and put it there, and I'll ask as as many of read as many as possible. I know that quite a number of you have come through in diaspora, one of our marketing partners for this, and I know you all aren't shy, and so I hope you all will speak up and join. Let me just we're gonna get back to the pilot and what it's going to take to pull it off. And just I'm just so excited hearing about it and imagining all these, getting the proof of concept down so that this can really be scaled in a massive way, reaching 10,000 boys. But it's all going to start this summer, right? Just so exciting. But you have another challenge, which is building an organization from scratch. You have this idea. I've done that a couple times in my career. It is one of the most rewarding, arduous, frustrating things. And one of the things that I've noticed is that as you've talked about it, people like Mamta, people like Jessica, who we'll hear from, and other people I haven't had as much contact with, have resonated with them, have just thrown themselves into this. What's it been like building this organization, particularly attracting people who this has spoken so clearly to them and their values and what they're worried about in society, and they're wanting to be part of the solution?
Yeah, I mean, it's exceeded my every expectation in terms of the kinds of champions that have come on board to help. You met Mamta at the top of the hour. I mean, she's been an invaluable early supporter. Another person that I have to call out is Pallavi Gupta, who really took
Mm.
early interest and really resonated with what we were trying to do and allowed me to kind of kickstart what we're doing. Of course, I'm so fortunate to have Jessica just join the board, but I think you'll hear more about her later. Another woman is Beth Porter, who was the former CEO and executive director of Breakthrough Collaborative, which, if you're not familiar with, they host or support 10,000 children every year, as well as 1,100 teaching fellows. So, just quite a robust organization. I'm so happy to have her support as well. Um, yeah, so it's been amazing. I mean, I think people have really come out of the woodwork. I can't, complete this without talking about the teachers that are working with me.
Mm-hmm.
My director of curriculum comes from Khan Academy. He was the first director of curriculum for the Khan Lab School, and he has been just an invaluable partner in terms of creating innovative education curriculum. My lead teacher, who will be handling all of the pilots, has a sociology degree where he focused his research on masculinity. He's done a decade of teaching online in terms of, so really deeply understands boys and what's happening with boys. So yeah, I have a really great early team that is really supportive and kind of evangelizing this, and I feel very fortunate.
Yeah, well, all I know is whenever I go to a meeting with any you or your team, I come out of it with more energy than I went in. So that's always a good sign. Um, Getting back to the pilot, so where do things stand now, particularly in terms of funding it? So you've developed a budget that will really allow you to do this at very high quality and learn the things you need to learn to scale this, in the future. How much is it going to cost, and how far are we along?
Yeah, so fundraising is probably a lot of people on this call understand when you're early on in the nonprofit world, it's pretty difficult to go after grants and it's more established organizations. And so we've primarily been hoping for the generosity of individual donors and people who can give in that way. We've managed to raise about $65,000 so far. We're looking to get to 100K so that we can fully support the two or three pilots this summer. And then after that, we'll take the learnings that we find and hope to raise more money after that.
Yeah, I'm very happy to see some questions coming in, so I want to get to those in a moment. But the I'll simply say that foundations, some of the larger philanthropic organizations that do tremendous work, but they tend to, I'm sure you've already heard this, right? They want a track record. So come
Yeah.
back to us when you've got proof of concept. But then the question is, how do you get to proof of concept? And you need people, you need visionary people who are willing to take a risk on a dynamic social entrepreneur like you and the team you're assembling. And so, absolutely, if any of you participating or people that would be interested in helping us go from 65,000 to 100,000, so we get this thing fully funded, do it properly, learn everything we can. Obviously, we would welcome that, but there are lots of other needs. I've decided that whenever I post on LinkedIn about Boys Who Write about every month, because there are articles coming out now. Like, I guess they were always there, but I only started noticing them once I met you.
Yes.
And so I posted one that was in the Nation magazine about the crisis affecting men and boys. And so their liaison with school systems, use social media, use the conversations that you're having to guide people to confront this issue and help them realize that there are solutions out there. So there are lots of things you can do. My colleague is going to has put in the chat the website, and you'll see how to donate there. But if you want to talk to, this is a small, very dynamic, responsive team. If you want to get involved, reach out to us, and we'll help you get involved in a way that's meaningful for you. I want to go to the questions. Is that okay?
Sure.
So the first question is, how can an individual, organization, or group access the virtual programs?
We're currently working with after-school programs, and so if a group is interested in working with us, they can just get in touch, and we can, provide a program for that particular group.
Oh, great. Yeah, we're far away from becoming a sclerotic bureaucracy at Boys Who Write. We're maybe that'll happen in 15 years, but right now you want to do something. This is a group that makes quick decisions and is very proactive and responsive, I should say. What would an ambassador's role and responsibilities look like to support this project? Great question.
Yeah, I think, first of all, we want to look at everybody individually. So, in terms of if you're interested in becoming an ambassador for us, we want to look at what background you bring and where you think you could be the most helpful. Um, you know, we need help with evangelizing it, with spreading the word. We need help with, the software part of this. We need help with schools and reaching schools. We need help with funding. There are many different areas where we would love to have people support us.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And invent your own, form of support and participation. Maybe we'll learn something from you and how you approach this. Who will be the partner? This is another question. Um, who will be the partners for the program? Schools, out of school time organizations, others? What's yeah, who organizationally, right? Who are potential partners for for down the road?
Mhm. Yeah, so we are initially going after school programs because those are kind of the easiest for us to get into, and that's in the US. So we're, KIP, we're working with their after school program, Boys and Girls Club, YMCA. We are in very early conversations with the state of Maryland. We are in early conversations with Peninsula Bridge. There are people in the area that are very interested in doing something with their after school programs. Abroad, we are having more luck with actual schools, private schools. I think in the US too, there might be an opportunity with boys' private schools or boarding schools or things like that. Eventually, we do want to be in the public schools. That's our ultimate goal, but it is a longer cycle to get in there. So just to go ahead and start, we're taking kind of an easier path.
Hmm. This is a question from me, but it's and by the way, with Jessica and me involved, Maryland is going to lead the nation. I can tell you that. California, we're gonna overtake you, and it's not going to take long, for sure. Especially with this great governor we have here. But anyway, don't want to get political here, but I love our governor was more. When you talk about reaching 10,000. Depending on how you look at it, that's a big number or not a big number, right? And if you're especially in Silicon Valley, you start immediately, thinking of, millions, billions. But let's just think about this for a second. If we could really reach 10,000 boys through this program, and some will take to it more than others or in different ways, but how does that become kind of the tip of the iceberg in terms of larger cultural change? I mean, just let's think creatively here for a minute. How could those 10,000 boys start to create new conversations, new norms in their schools, in their families, in their friends? Think through the ripple effect factor here.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's, 10,000 is, in my mind, is a significant number. It's when we start to um, really make a dent in what's happening and start to really think about actual change and an actual intervention. When we look at those 10,000 boys, we hope in the long term that they are able to take what they learn into their communities and into the stakeholders that they have in their lives. So not only in terms of leadership, which we of course hope for, we hope that they'll be able to go out and be natural leaders with more empathy and more compassion, but we also want them to go back to their families and to their marriages and to their partnerships and be able to relate in a much more understanding and deeper way than perhaps they do today. And of course, as they get older, hopefully they will pass that on to, the people that are younger than them. I do have a vision that when we expand enough, that we build out our mentorship programs so that we have college age boys from universities volunteering their time back to the organization so that they can start to mentor younger boys. And so, that's kind of how we hope that it starts to spread and make an impact.
Wonderful. I think one of the participants here, my friend Minu Gupta, she runs an wonderful organization called Foundation for Excellence, and they provide scholarships in India. And one of the things they invite the scholars optionally to fund 2 scholarships for the next after they get established in their careers. And this kind of pay it forward kind of approach can be very, very powerful.
Yeah,
Um,
sorry, I actually take a lot of influence from FFE. I love that organization, and it was kind of in what they do in terms of becoming a self-sustaining organization that I have also planned Boys Who Write to be self-sustaining, in year 3 with 10,000 boys. Now, obviously, we would raise more if we go beyond that, but yeah, I really love FFE and Minu's work is spectacular. So.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
yeah.
We've had another question come in. So through your research, what have you learned about what gets boys interested and engaged in writing and reading? Interesting and action-oriented topics, boy heroes or main characters? Good question.
Yeah, I think that's a great question because, when we look at the schools today, um, I'll say many of the books that they are required to read are um, classics, books that have a lot of female protagonists. Um, Topics that they are not at all engaged with. And so, even in my own homeschooling experience, we often looked for ways to reach boys that are not necessarily the traditional book. Harry Potter did a great job in bringing on a whole generation of readers, right? But now we're kind of beyond Harry Potter, and we're looking at, when in our curriculum, we look at things like rap music, like spoken word poetry, but we're also using, things like video to engage them. So we're looking at, TEDx talks, and we're looking at um, influencers online and what they're saying, and trying to really meld the idea that listening is a very important part of reading and writing as well. And so we want to go ahead and meet boys where we think their interests lie. And as part of our pilot program, we are involving boys in our development. So, when we begin our pilot program, we have 4 or 5 boys that we work with within that particular organization who can kind of talk to us and say, well, hey, that's not something I'm really interested in, but maybe we could do something different here. And we take that feedback and we incorporate it. We're creating part of the pilot program creates, they're creating RPGs using Scratch, and within that we try to help them create dialogue for their characters. And we're creating a game. And so there is narrative and plot structure and all of that is being involved in that exercise. But it's developing a game at the end of the day. So that's really fun for the boys. So
Yeah, as a formerly sports crazed kid myself, turning things into games can really make things not feel like work. And it reminds me that so much of our education in many countries of the world, we're educating in a kind of 19th and 20th century kind of manner, where forgetting that we're actually in the 21st century. And it seems like you've kind of figured out how to really meet people where they are. Good additional questions. Wow. Is there a profile of a boy you are particularly looking to serve? It seems like all boys could benefit.
All boys could benefit. Absolutely. We think that all boys could benefit. Of course, these problems do seem to be exacerbated in more underserved communities. So we do hope to work with a wealth of those kinds of communities as well. But I think middle class boys are experiencing, this problem as well. And honestly, the more privilege a boy has, we see a lot more of the problems within those communities. And so we definitely want to address all boys.
Hmm. Okay. And what levels of investment are you seeking? So this goes back, I think, to the original question, but we have a short-term fundraising goal of closing a gap of $35,000 between what we've raised, and it's quite incredible that people have committed $65,000 just without anything except a dream and a plan. Um, but so that's the short term. But maybe the questioner is interested in longer term, or in terms of are there ways that people can invest beyond philanthropic donations? But anyway, interpret that how you will. Any response?
Yeah, I mean, we do need that 35K to complete the three pilots that we have so far. But honestly, we want to run a few more pilots because we really want to get a wide scope in terms of what boys in different areas around the world, in different regions of the US experience. And so, the next round of funding would be an additional 150K for more pilots to be completed. Once those pilots are completed, everything is completed, we're going to take a pause and just kind of understand what we need to do in terms of building out our platform and doing all of that. In terms of rolling it out into the schools, we will be getting revenue from the schools in the fall. So we will be supplementing with that as well, but that is not enough yet to be able to sustain the organization.
Great. I was like worried that we'd get no questions. Not the case. How will you be measuring the results coming from the pilot and plowing that back into the program going forward?
Yeah, so we have a few different assessment tools that we're using. We are using California state standards to measure reading comprehension, literacy, a few other metrics that we've designated. And then we're using CASEL and the DESA frameworks to be able to measure social emotional learning. We take assessments before they start the program. We take assessments when they complete the program. And then within the program, we have assessments, we have qualitative assessments from the teacher, we have a variety of things that are happening within the program as well.
Better start studying the Maryland state standards.
Yeah.
When we've Jessica and I have got some big plans. But here's a great question: would you be interested in working with deaf boys in the U.S. and in India? Is this something you've considered? Hmm.
I would love to work with deaf boys, of course. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. That's so again, if you have some vision for that and you're on this in the audience here, reach out and maybe we can pull something together. How could young boys who are homeschooled access the program? These young boys are very often disconnected socially and overly rely on online networks, which is a problematic for obvious reasons.
Yep, I come from that place as well. So, yeah, homeschool boys, I know that there are a lot of groups, homeschool groups that are out there. And if a homeschool group of 15 to 20 boys would be interested in doing a pilot, we would be happy to host that. So, um,
Hmm.
that's just in my mind, that's just another small school that we could do a pilot with that I think would be really, really interesting and rewarding as well for me personally.
Hmm. Wonderful. What is the optimal window? Thank you all for these great questions. Again, what is the optimal window for intervention in terms of age? When are you
Yeah,
try? I mean, I'm sure you could benefit at various ages, but is there like a window where that's the sweet spot, and why?
yeah, yeah. So just when I started the organization, we thought we would go after high school boys because we saw most of the problems happening kind of at that age. So we did focus groups nationwide. And what we found is that by the time they're in high school, they're really pretty fixed and kind of rigid in what they like and what they don't like and who they are as people. I think it's a little too late. The early years, like elementary school, is a little too young because, at that point, the boys don't quite read yet. They don't have that emotional maturity to kind of understand the topics that we're discussing. And so middle school is the sweet spot. And so it's fifth to eighth grade. In the US, that's 27 million boys. Worldwide, that's a much greater number, of course. But, we find that a lot of interventions can take place in that sweet spot of fifth to eighth grade.
Hmm, fascinating. As you've as people may be thinking about, how do I get involved? What's the what are the pros and cons of this? You and Mamta have been quite diligent in going out and meeting with people, and that's how you've attracted so many volunteers and so much money so far. But with a lot more needed. But when you have those conversations, what are some of the common objections people have, and then how do you as they really kind of try to swallow this whole and say, is this really needed, and should I get really involved in this? What are some questions that people have that have really made you think, and how have you kind of responded to them, either by sharing some knowledge they didn't have, or maybe modifying your approach?
Yeah, I think, some of the questions that we get are, is this really a problem?
Mhm.
Girls are the problem. We need to help girls.
Mm.
Obviously we need to help girls. That is for sure. I am a strong feminist. I really believe in supporting girls. But, I think what people don't realize is what is happening to the boys. And I think that's why we titled this kind of the silent epidemic or the quiet crisis, because they don't really know that boys are falling behind, that they are getting disengaged, that they are um, not able to interact with, a lot of these girls that are just shooting, flying high now with all the support we've given them over the past couple of decades. And so now, anecdotally, you hear about, girls in college saying that they don't want to date the guys because they can't find a way to relate to the guys. And that's just a small example, but a lot of times, people that we meet with just don't realize that there is actually a problem for boys, and that, we do, if we support the boys, in essence, we're supporting the girls, because
Mm.
by lifting boys and making them more empathetic, human beings, we're of course having advancing their relationships with girls and advancing, equity in the workplace and all of that. So that's one challenge. That's one question I think that comes up. I think sometimes people will say, well, I have a son and he's nothing like this, so I don't have that experience. And I would say that's true. I mean, many of our boys are doing wonderfully, my son included. I think he's a really, really wonderful young man. But I think we have to look at the world, more globally. I mean, when we're in marketing, we're often told, don't use your own personal experience as an example for what's happening out there. And if you start to look at the research, and then, if you just start to observe what's happening with boys, I think you'll quickly notice that even though your own son may not be responding in this way, there are many, many boys out there that are having these challenges.
Mm. I go a little outside of this before we're going to bring Jessica in just a moment. But all of us, you mentioned the lack of role models,
Mhm.
and I think you meant among kind of public figures, and not only lack of positive role models, but some not so positive role models that are out there. But all of us, I'm a 58-year-old male. I have four nephews, and whether people have children, grandchildren, nephews, people in their neighborhood, what can men do to be better role models in their families, their communities, for addressing this issue? Because and how can we avoid just making things worse, through maybe unintentionally reinforcing some of these models?
Yeah, I mean, I think when we talk to a lot of schools and parents out there, we realize that, a lot of cultures do actually still have kind of these dominant ideas of what the male is in the household, what their role is. And those are things that we need to kind of break down and start to understand, that there is more equity between the men and the women in our families. And I think in terms of what parents or uncles or, men in your community can do, It's really about trying to understand that it's not weak to express your feelings. It's not weak to be able to tell another person that you're hurting or that you are challenged by something, and you often feel much better by being allowed to share that, you know? And so I think just giving our young boys space and room to be able to share what's really, you know, in their minds and in their hearts, um, will really make a big difference. Just if you were to do that one thing, I think that would make a huge difference in a young boy's life. So yeah, I think
Thank
that's,
you.
yeah.
That's very useful and practical. One more question that came in, and then we'll bring in Jessica. Do you think there's recognition that this is not an individual problem, but a systemic one?
I think we're beginning to realize that.
Mm,
I think, as you mentioned, you know, we see it in the media now every day almost. We see an article in the New York Times, we see articles in the Wall Street Journal talking about what's happening with boys. I think Richard Reeves did us a very big favor. You know, Richard Reeves is uh, I actually don't know what his title is, but he came from the Brookings Institute and he wrote a book called Of Boys and Men. And he was, you must have seen him on TV all through the political election cycle, talking a lot about what's happening to our boys and men. And so he has really, really evangelized what's happening and made this, you know, made people start to understand that this is a systemic problem that we do need to get involved with.
mm. And building a systemic solution, brick by brick. It's so exciting. Shayla, thank you for your leadership and for educating all of us, myself included, in this webinar. I now want to bring on my friend and Boys Who Write board member, Jessica Langerman, to give some closing comments. Hi, Jessica.
Hey, Alex.
And I just want to say, by way of introduction, no long, boring one, but I got to know Jessica as an amazing activist and change maker in the climate change movement. Did incredible things. We could have a long webinar about that, just her accomplishments and the organizations she's supported. But now she's really grabbed onto this issue, and I'm so excited by that. And Jessica, over to you to wrap this up and give us all some final words to motivate us to do the best we can to support this movement.
Thank you so much, Alex. I've been so touched and impressed by the questions that we've been receiving, including your own. And one piece of advice I got as a parent once was that my kids will probably often not do what I say, but they very likely will do what I do. So if I am kind, if I am forgiving, if I'm flexible, those qualities I hope my kids will absorb. But at any rate, the reason why I have become so excited about this program of Shayla's is kind of twofold, and I really do come at it from two angles. One is that I adopted 3 kids out of foster care, and the 2 boys are 20 years apart. So I had the experience of raising 2 boys in 2 different generations. One was before social media and one was after. And the boy who was raised before social media had different spheres of influence in his life. For example, there was the home sphere, there was the school sphere, there were the homes of his friends, there was church, there was swim team, etc. And if one system failed, he would have others to turn to. My second son was a freshman when the pandemic hit, and he was forced online, but he had already become, frankly, probably it is not too strong a word to say, addicted to social media by that age, despite everything my husband and I tried to do to moderate his time online. It was an unbelievably disheartening and difficult battle. And I felt less and less that I felt that the spheres of influence in his life had reduced down to really this online world, which I didn't well understand, but which I could see from its effects on his character was toxic. Fighting that is an ongoing battle in our household. So I have a personal, experience with this, But another kind of personal but more broadly social aspect is that in the past, when I have seen social problems like this emerging, not just in my family, but in the society in general, my way of trying to affect good was to engage politically by trying to help fund studies for legislation, trying to help model legislation, introduce legislation to legislators, and then financially support those legislators and campaigns, politicians who I knew were invested in the kind of change that I wanted to see. And, you know, there's room for every political standpoint in this organization. For myself, I worked very hard over the last year for a candidate who was soundly defeated. And that defeat was very, very devastating for me. I really saw no way forward. I didn't know how I could be effective if I can't be effective right now politically. And then Alex introduced me to Shayla, and I am a former high school English teacher, and I know how hard it is to affect change within systems like public schools. I remember trying to introduce different kinds of literature into my own classes, and I would have to face incredible scrutiny and resistance from my own colleagues just to try a new book. So what Shayla's organization is really showing me is that there are different ways to effect systemic change in our society. And since becoming involved with this organization, I have felt so much less depressed, frankly, less defeated, because I find that people are kind of electrified by this subject. Like me, most of the people we talk to will begin to recognize their own sons, nephews, neighbors' kids. And do we not all also recognize the vulgarity, the chest thumping, immodest, swaggering bravado that is now passing as manliness in the highest offices of the land? I have felt hopelessly disempowered about that. I have not known how to begin to make change there until I met Shayla. And because she has designed this, at least within the States, to be an after-school program, we do not have to fight the bureaucracies of the school system. Shayla and I just had a fantastic conversation with a couple of administrators in Prince George's County here in Maryland, and they were, frankly, they were just electrified by it. So it is a very easy sell, and I am incredibly optimistic that we are going to be successful. We do need some additional funders like myself, who I hope, you know, will be willing to jump in for such a worthy cause, but also a cause that we will be able to measure and adjust our methods according to what successes we have. So, you know, I'm just very optimistic about this. I think we can build alternatives to the toxicity we see right now and a more hopeful world in general. So that's my speech. Thank you.
Much, Jessica. That was just so kind. I really appreciate that.
Very true.
Okay, well, thank you all for joining. If you can still hear me, maybe not see me, and there'll be lots of ways to engage. Thank you, Jessica, and for all of you who've given up an hour of your time to be here. And we are hoping that to see you, within the Boys Who Write movement in the days and months and years ahead. Thank you all.